Okay, this is our third and final video on the topic of transporting plants. Today we're going to look at experiments and we're going to look at how to set up experiments to investigate the rate of transpiration. So I'm looking for you to be able to explain what makes a valid experiment, what makes an experiment's results reliable, and I want you to describe how you'd set up a basic experiment to investigate each of the three factors affecting the rate of transpiration. Because we can't see the evaporation of water, we also have to think about what we can measure in order to find out how quickly that's happening. Okay, so a quick reminder of transpiration. That's this movement of water through the plant and the evaporation of water out to the leaves. So we're going to have to think about ways that we can measure how quickly a plant is losing water, or the speed at which it's losing water out of its leaves, which is what we define as the rate of transpiration. There's three factors affecting that. If we increase the temperature or increase the wind speed, we're going to increase the speed or the rate of transpiration. However, humidity is how much water there is in the air. If we increase the humidity, this will actually decrease the rate of transpiration. So this is your underlying biology. Here is a transpiration experiment. There is a plant that we have here, which is covered in a polythene bag. And you'll see that bag B has no plant. Okay, so nothing should really happen in bag B. Ideally, bag B would be around a pot with no plant. That's a control experiment. It's just to show us that anything that does happen in A is going to be caused by the plant. So that's why we have a control. Okay, what is exiting the leaf and being trapped by the bag? So you should know from your KU two things that leave a leaf: oxygen and water. And transpiration is about the loss of water through the leaves. So in this experiment, we're using the bag to trap water in the air around the plant. In bullet point 2, it says it will increase the concentration of water in that area. So what's that variable called? Well, we call how much water there is in the air the humidity. So by putting that bag on and leaving the bag on, it's going to increase the humidity because there will be more and more and more water being trapped in the air around the leaves. Okay, a hypothesis is a prediction. So the third bullet point is asking you to predict what will happen to the rate of transpiration over time. So have a think about that. What's going to happen to the rate? The rate's going to either increase or decrease. Hopefully you're thinking to yourself that the bag's going to trap the water, so humidity is going to increase, and as humidity increases, the rate of transpiration decreases. How would you change this setup to investigate the effect of wind speed? So in science, if you're given in your test, you're given one experiment investigating one variable, for example, this one's investigating humidity, and you're asked to change it to investigate another variable, then there's two things that you have to do. In a valid experiment, remember V to stand for variables, in a valid experiment, only one variable changes. So if we're now investigating wind speed, the first thing we have to do is remove the bag. Okay, so we're not going to change the humidity. Second thing, you would have to add a fan, which you can set at different speeds, and that's how to investigate wind speeds. If you said hairdryer, that's okay. However, because hairdryers also increase the temperature, that wouldn't be valid. So you would have to specifically say use a hairdryer at a cool setting. So easier than that, just say use a fan at different speeds. Okay, so two things to take away there. One, make sure only one thing's changing. So take away the variable being changed already, which is remove the bag. 2, add a fan at different speeds. Okay, and then what's going to happen? As the humidity increases to 40 to 50%, our rate of transpiration is decreasing. So the longer we leave that bag on, the more water's going to be in the air, the less transpiration is going to happen. Okay, explain the results in each setup. So I've covered number 1 up with a box. And we can kind of look at what's happening here in the video. So number 2, the water moves up a little bit because you put a tube in, the water will move up into that tube, but it will just stay there because there's nothing using the water up. In number 3, that has leaves, so the water should keep travelling up into the plant and it will start being lost through the leaves. So we'd expect the volume of water in number 3 to decrease. So think about what that would look like. We can either measure the volume afterwards and that would show a change, or we can measure the mass of the water afterwards and that would show the change. Number 4, this plant has no leaves, so we could compare 3 and 4 directly if we used the same size of plant and the same starting volume of water and had the same temperature, same humidity, same wind speed, and we'd be able to then see the effect of the number of leaves. Okay, and I'd predict that my hypothesis would be the one with the more leaves would lose the most water. Okay, it would have the higher rate of transpiration. Number 5's got a bag on it. So number 5 is looking at humidity. It's trapping the water round about it. I can't compare 4 and 5 because then I'd have a bag and no bag and I'd have leaves and no leaves. What I would do is compare 3 and 5. So both plants are the same number of leaves. The only difference is bag or no bag. So again, it's valid because only one variable is being changed. Number 6, you can actually see the leaves moving. That's because I'm changing wind speed, okay? And hopefully we'd find out that is the more we increase the wind speed, the faster the water's taken up and lost. So the greater the change in the water volume or water mass, showing a greater rate of transpiration. Which one would you compare 6 to? So pause now and have a think. When you're ready, press play again. Again, I'd compare 6 to 3. You can't compare to 4 because 4 has no leaves. So that's 2 things changing, the wind speed and the number of leaves. Likewise, 5's got a bag over it, so changing the humidity and wind speed, plus the wind wouldn't hit the leaves. So comparing 3 and 6 is a valid comparison because the only difference between 3 and 6 is your wind speed. So then you can compare a normal reaction without wind, how fast a normal rate of transpiration is, and compare that to your new rate of transpiration at different wind speeds. Okay, so this looks at an exam question. Part A, it says changing the surrounding environment can have an effect on the rate of transpiration. And there's your 3 variables that you've been told to learn. State the effect. Now that means what's going to happen to the rate. So you're either saying the rate's increasing or decreasing. So pause now, have a chance to write these 3 answers down and press play when you want the answer. So increased humidity, that's the one that means there's more water in the air. So your answer would be it decreases the rate of transpiration. With the second 2, as both the temperature and wind speed increase, it will be the same answer. Increase in temperature or wind speed increases the rate of transpiration. So you need to know the KU and you know how to write this down as well. So if you're asked about what's happening to rate, it's either decrease or increase. Choose any environmental change listed above, which means you can choose humidity, temperature, or wind speed, and describe how you would change the apparatus above to allow you to investigate that. Pause now and try all 3, and then I'll play and I'll tell you how. Okay, to change humidity, I would put a polythene bag over the leaf shoot. It's important I've said polythene, I still need to allow the light to travel through into it, so I'm not changing it into dark and light as well, because I'd be changing 2 variables. I'm only changing the humidity. So a see-through or a clear polythene bag would allow me to get water to build up in the air round about it, changing the humidity. That's the only thing I would change. If instead I was changing temperature, what I would do is repeat this experiment in water baths at different temperatures. Okay, so putting the whole setup into a water bath setup at a different temperature. A water bath's like a big trough, just like a bath in your house basically, but not that big, which you can put something into and the machine keeps the water at a set temperature. Final one, to increase the wind speed, I could say add a fan, which you can use to change to different wind speeds. Okay, so in planning investigations, these are good questions to think about. So first of all, what's your underlying biology? In this type of experiments, what is transpiration? So we need to know that's the loss of water through the leaves of the plant. If we know that, we can plan to investigate the rate of transpiration, which is the speed at which it happens. We have to find one variable that we're going to change, which will affect the rate of transpiration. That in brackets says IV, that stands for the independent variable. It's independent because it's the only variable that we're going to change. All other variables will be kept the same to make it valid. So think about things that you could change now. So pause the video and think about things you could change. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to write that down. So our basic things we could change are the humidity of the air around the plant. We could change the temperature. We could change the wind speed. The other thing you might want to change is the number of leaves in the plant. Obviously, the more leaves you have, the more stomata. So again, the faster the rate of transpiration. What is being found out is the dV in brackets. That's your dependent variable. These are always your results. On a graph of results, the independent variable always goes along the bottom because that's what you're changing. And then how high you go up on the y-axis to mark your result depends on what you've done at the bottom. So we call that the dependent variable. So this is going to be the rate of transpiration. But as I mentioned earlier, we can't see how quickly water's leaving the plant. So we've got to think about how we're going to measure it. And this setup is called a pedometer. You can see here that as the water is being used up by the plant, it's going to move to the plant and out the leaves. So the water level is going to move down. And you can see there's a measured scale there. So I could basically measure the distance travelled by the water in a given time. Now it's important because you're doing a rate that's against time. So it could be the movement of water in 1 minute or the movement of water after 10 minutes, as long as it's the same unit of time every time. Okay, so I might do it with like a low wind speed and it only moves 1 centimetre in 10 minutes. A medium wind speed and it moves 4 centimetres in 10 minutes. And a high wind speed and it moves 10 centimetres in 10 minutes. That would give me the rate of transpiration, even though I can't see it. So this is what I'd do in my results table, would be the distance travelled by the water in 10 minutes. I'd plot that on my graph. If I'm describing that, I would say as wind speed increased, the distance travelled by the water in 10 minutes also increased. But in a conclusion, I need to come back to my dependent variable. So I would say that as wind speed increased, the distance travelled by the water in 10 minutes also increased. This shows that increasing the wind speed increases the rate of transpiration. A conclusion must always answer the dependent variable that you set out to find out, no matter how you've designed the way to find that. Okay, we don't have to do a pedometer, we don't have to look at the distance travelled by the water, we could use scales. So the more water that's being used up, the more the mass is going to decrease. So again, I could repeat the same experiment 4 times, so I could maybe do it at 4 different temperatures. I could start every plant with, I don't know, say 30 grams of water. I could leave them in a water bath for 20 minutes, then take each one out and remeasure its mass. Now, if it's losing water, I'm predicting the mass will decrease. So in my table, I'd record the change in mass after 10 minutes and then write down how much it's decreased by. But then again, in my conclusion, I would have to say that as temperature increased, the mass of water lost also increased. Therefore, and this is my conclusion, as temperature increases, the rate of transpiration increases. So it doesn't matter how we get to the rate of transpiration. It could be how to measure the distance travelled with a pedometer, or it could be the change in mass using scales. As long as I know that that's what I'm plotting in my graph, and then I'm translating that or I'm changing that back to the language of my aim when I'm making a conclusion.